right, welcome back. And in case you're just joining us, we are sustaining that conversation on the police reforms coming just a few days after retired Chief Justice David Kenani Maraga handed over the report by the task force that he was leading to discuss these reforms to President William Ruto. And I'm having in studio a panel of three. We are having this morning George Musamali, a security analyst, Dimas Kiprono, Deputy Executive Director, ICJ Kenya, and Dr. J.M. Waiganjo, Commissioner IPO. And before we went to the break, gentlemen, we had just started dissecting this particular subject. One of the recommendations that is contained in this report is that the government should consider initiating a negotiated exit or any other legal modality for the current commissioners of the National Police Service Commission. It's something that has elicited a lot of debate. And in fact, yesterday, the police bosses called for a crisis meeting just to discuss the Maraga report that indicted them. And this was a meeting that, of course, aborted and was scheduled to take place again on Tuesday next week. But on the agenda list, the key issue was to discuss that particular recommendation, and because the report actually said that the National Police Service Commission failed to deliver in their human resource docket as dictated by the Constitution, and also that its powers has been usurped by the commanders, the police commanders. Dr. Waiganjo, do you think this is the dose that actually is needed? And I don't know why I'm asking you this question, because I can already tell.
I'll start by saying that.
But do you think let's do away with the current National Police Service Commission as is the solution that we need to be able to address what they were supposed to fix in the first place with regards to the welfare of the police officers and other matters? Is that the step?
The National Police Service Commission is a very important commission. It's a constitutional commission. And the reason why that commission was brought is so that it could take care of the members of the National Police Service Commission. In other words, the chair of the National Police Service Commission is a civilian. And the police are disciplined service. And although the police have their spokesperson, that is a police person. So therefore, even the public looking at the police spokesperson talk on behalf of the police or National Police Service, they see a PR person for the National Police Service. But the National Police Service Commission should be the advocate for the members of the National Police Service in the court of public opinion, so that whenever there is an issue affecting the members of the National Police Service, it is the National Police Service Commission, through their spokesperson, the chair of that commission, who should come and inform the public where they are, what they are doing, and become an advocate in that respect. But going a little back, and the reason why I support their immediate exit, is that there are no reforms that can be carried out with the current commissioners in office. And the reason I say that, and that is the starting point, even the meeting they called to save their jobs, they couldn't even convene it. Ask any member of the National Police today where they are with that commission. This commission has within itself a committee that deals with the discipline of the members of the National Police Service. And that committee doesn't sit. So that even the police officers who probably are on interdiction and have made appeals to that commission to look through why they have been relieved of their duties within the service, those matters have not been heard. You hear a policeman or a policewoman with a matter before the National Police Service Commission pending for 3 years. This is a commission that has a mandate of 6 years. They are exiting in May of 2025. If we are to wait for their exit, then we are prepared the Maraga report until 2025. That is not the way this country
Nothing can move. That is what
nothing can move. 3 officers sit in that, actually 5, because we have the Inspector General sitting in that commission, we have the 2 DIGs sitting in that commission, and 2 retired officers. Those are 5. So that if we have 5 of them sitting and they do not wish to have quorum, then they withdraw, they don't turn up. And then the commission doesn't have quorum. So what kind of a commission are we talking about here? So we subject our policemen and women in turmoil forever because the commission that is a constitutional commission that was formed to look after their welfare is sitting pretty, is asleep. So this country, we have a very bad habit, I'm sorry to say. The constitution is very progressive. So the constitution creates certain commissions and gives citizens, civilians, authority to sit in those commissions. Why? So that now they can become, apart from the executive, they are another arm, you know, that helps move things. So now you are the chair of the National Police Service Commission. You are the Inspector General of Police. And still we are complaining that it's the head of state that is interfering with those matters. Yet, there is a lot of political goodwill, if you ask me. When the head of state came into office, they have financial autonomous. So that's a good move. So what happens next? Now we do have this task force. The people sitting, the Inspector General of Police, have refused to do his work. The chair of the National Police Service has refused to do their work. So how is that a political badwill or bad faith?
All right.
It is the individuals who are not working. The people who have been put into office, they do not work. So whether there is intimidation from the executive, there will always be intimidation everywhere, even from your house, with your spouse.
But, you know, the pressure
so if
that
you don't
comes
stand with your 2 feet, then we are in trouble, all of us.
It depends on which sort of intimidation, though. But Musamali, let's try and diagnose what exactly is the problem. We have 2 issues here. The commission itself as an institution and the people who are actually working within that commission. In trying to look at the comprehensive approach of how to now identify the real problem so that we are not back to where we are right now, what informs that if you look at the commission, its structures and the people under it, the current commission that we are now discussing? Is it the people? Is it the commission itself? Or it's something else that's not even within what they can control?
Personally, I believe it's not the commission, it's the people.
It's the people
that we put in that commission. And what I look at here is what I call self-preservation. And I think they have learned from experience of the past commissioners. He said that the first Inspector General of Police and the deputies were hounded out of office. That is exactly what happened. And immediately they were kicked out. We now came up with the 2014 security bills. We removed security of tenure. We said they will not be competitively recruited by the National Police Service Commission. You see, when you remove this kind of powers from me, you're weakening me. You expect me to be serving the police officers, yet the Inspector General of Police is not answerable to me. I'll give orders, they will not be obeyed. What happens to me? You talk about issues of recruitment. I remember when Kavuludi was the chair, there was a tug of war. There was a tussle on who is supposed to do what in terms of recruitment. The police will announce their own recruitment from Vigilance House or Jogo House then, and then we will have the National Police Service Commission coming in and saying, no, this is our mandate. And what happens? The politicians will take sides and say, no, this is the mandate of the Inspector General. Why? Because that is where their bread is buttered. So I believe if at all we want to have a reformed police, we need to go back to the spirit of the 2010 Constitution. We need to go back and say, as Maraga has recommended, that let us have independence of the police, let the National Police Service Commission do its mandate, and let us have the Inspector General do the operational bit of the work. But as it is right now, who is in charge of the other? Yes, we are members of this commission, but I'll come to the meetings and say, I have instructions from somewhere not to do this. Yet the mandate is mine constitutionally. So I look at it and say, okay, bora afya. I take a back seat and watch things happen. And this is why I said from the onset that we need to delink politics from matters of national security, from matters of the National Police Service. Unless we do that, where we have an independent Inspector General, competitively recruited, a person who will be there to execute his constitutional mandate, 2 deputies that will be there to execute their constitutional mandate. We have a National Police Service Commission that will draw the line and say, ours is purely matters of human resource.
and you, the Inspector General, and your deputies, you handle the operational part of this. Let us agree. Let's move forward. And this is why you find that all the other recommendations by the previous commissions have never been implemented, because people are relying on the police for certain political, to meet certain political ends. And this is why now you'll find that they feel like if we give police independence, the way it happened in 2010, then we will not be in control. As opposed to other neighboring countries where the executive are in control of the military, that is not happening in Kenya. We have a very professional...
so you're suggesting that there is a deliberate attempt to
It's very deliberate, very deliberate. And that is why we had to come up with the security bill in 2014. If you look at what Kriegler said after the clashes of 2007, 2008, he clearly stated that unless you reform the police, have an independent police, you will be having these problems every election cycle. And look at where we are.
That's exactly what
you're
always talking about. I mean, every election here, and I keep saying this, after every election, the conversation is, let's reform the police.
The pillar, I said, the police are the pillar that supports these regimes. And this is why now, letting them go, because in Uganda, you will go for the army, UPDF. In Kenya, you try the army, they'll tell you, no, it's not our mandate. So in Kenya, who can we control?
The police.
Dimas, you had something?
Yeah, in fact, I argued the Security Laws Amendment Act. And part of the sections that we got declared unconstitutional was one that recommended the creation of something called the National Police Service Disciplinary Board, which basically replicated the whole role of the National Police Service Commission and took it away of the commission. So we were lucky to have argued satisfactory for the removal of that section. But what I'm trying to tell you is that from the onset, certain organs were never supposed to work as they were supposed to work. And so then, and that is why my colleague is saying that we need now to draw the line in the sand and say, going forward, we will delink the National Police Service from politics, the National Police Service Commission from politics. IPOA has done a good job in terms of holding police officers fit to the fire when it comes to criminal acts and complaints against from the public and from other officers. We have seen the cases that have gone to court. But the others, you might say that it is deliberate or by design that they have not been able to work. However, the initial National Police Service Commission, stamped its foot, tried to work. I feel like this current commission, I think they got a brief when they came in and they decided to play the tune. And that is why we are getting such harsh indictment from the task force. Yes.
Perhaps the other issue we may want to look at is the mechanism of the reforms. Because we're talking about an old service. And this service has been, I don't know what to call it. I don't want to say been laped or whatever, but it's been treaded upon, I mean, a lot of injustice have been going on within the National Police Service. For instance, there is a lot of nepotism within the service. And the nepotism obviously comes from the recruitment. You find the officers we are recruiting do not have a calling to become officers. And the work of a police officer is more like a calling, I mean, it's not just another place to go and while away time. So that you find some people do not even go to Keganjo. Some people do not even go to the field to be recruited, the manner in which we recruit. There are secret lists that are sneaked in of members of senior officers who joins this service. So that now the service becomes like a family business. So if we are going to be very, very, very deliberate on the reforms, then we have to dismiss all the leadership of the National Police Service from the senior superintendent of police upwards. It is the only radical way to go, because if they stay there, then we keep recruiting their relatives, So that if you are transferring an officer to the northern frontier and this officer is related to a senior officer, the senior officer will say, oh no, he has a baby, so let him stay in Nairobi, or he just got married. That is the nonsense we do not want to see within the National Police Service. So therefore, there are about 2-3 generations within the service. People who will never change, whatever you do. Unless you wait for them to retire.
I mean, you're very pessimistic. We're trying, I don't know.
I'm in the center of this because, you know, at the independent
You're on the ground.
They get the report.
At the Independent Policing Oversight Authority.
We are hoping things will be better.
You know, I mean, one of our mandate is to professionalize the National Police Service. We have done everything we need to do to professionalize this service. We have given address recommendations to the Cabinet Secretary, to Parliament, the Committee of National Administration and Security. We have done everything we need to do. The implementation bit is what is lacking. And what we have found out is that the service is rotten from the head. And the junior officers are really suffering. I can tell you for a fact. They go without food. Their uniforms are worn out. Right now, we are on El Nino, but the exams are going on. I tell you for a fact, those officers who are escorting examination papers may not even get their allowances. So what are we talking about? We are talking about treating our officers like animals, being very impersonal with them, denying them their allowances, changing their insurance without their participation. They do not have a union, and they shouldn't because the Constitution says so. So it is the National Police Service Commission who should be their union. So why shouldn't I be pessimistic? I'll be optimistic when the current commissioners leave office.
And
speaking of which, there was an officer who was killed in Siaya, who was a part of that entourage that is manning exams. They were transferring exams to another. And yeah, you want to say?
For the family of that officer now, let me tell you, to get their benefits, it will take years and years. That's where I was also coming from. Vigilant House needs to be monitored, inspected, to see what documentation goes on there. It is the senior officers who eat the commissions and the allowances of the junior officers. That is what is happening on the ground. Any policeman, policewoman will tell you that. They are hardly paid. Their food is taken and sold. So how can we blame our police officers when we tolerate that leadership that continues to oppress them, because that is oppression.
All right.
So
all right. I understand your emotion and where this is coming from. It's evident, of course. You know, you warned me. You told me you're on the ground, so you know what happens in there. Let me talk to another gentleman who has been on the ground. Musamali, there are quite a number of recommendations in this report by the Justice David Maraga-led teams. One of them is a salary increment plan of 40% for the police, the prison, and the National Youth Service. This will be done in a span of 3 years. Better working conditions that will include consolidated medical covers and house allowance, and of course, talking about matters of recruitment for NYS to go to about 100,000 annually. I can talk about the other goodies that are contained in this report, but do they capture some of the, challenges that he is talking about? Will they change anything?
They do capture. And as I said before, this is not the first time we are hearing about this. IPOA did their own. National Police Service Commission did their own. But the implementation bit is what is not there. And when you're talking about 40%, I heard the president talk about this. He said we are giving them 40%. But I'm sending this to the SRC, yeah. Now, I'm looking at that situation where he'll say, my hands are tied. Because he's not saying outrightly implement. He's sending it to another commission to make that decision. Will it happen? When you're talking about 40% in 3 years, that means around 13% per year. The starting salary of a police constable is 21,000 shillings. So you're giving this person 2,000 shillings as an increment for 1 year. And then these 2,000 shillings subjected to taxation. So we are nowhere. We are not moving. Basically, what is causing all these problems in the National Police Service is what we call low wages. Yeah? These low wages that you're paying, the below subsistence levels. You give me money that cannot even feed my family. You give me money that cannot even take me to hospital. I remember when I did my resignation from the service, I clearly stated that here I'm only surviving. You told me you're going to give me free housing, you are accommodating me. 1 house, 3 families. Is that accommodation or that is free housing? When I need uniform, ask him, he has talked about it. When you need uniform, you need to go into your pocket to get this uniform from the stores. And if you look at the new blue uniforms, who are donning those uniforms so much in Kenya? The traffic police officers, because they were told, without these uniforms, you will not go out to work on the roads. So they had to buy the uniforms themselves. So this is a person that has been pushed to the corner. Low wages.
These uniforms are bought? They're not given annually? There's a budget for...
There is a budget for that. There is a budget for that, and Dr. Arya just said it. That money ends up in people's pockets. So for you to work, you need to resource yourself. We were told the other day by the president that police have been given financial autonomy. Go to the stations. That money has not reached the stations. And if it comes in drips, which is not enough to sustain a station. And you'll find that you go to a station, you're making a report, a police officer will tell you, can you go and buy foolscap so that I can record your statement? There's no stationery. So that work environment, harsh work environment, is what is giving us the kind of police service that we are having. It's producing beasts instead of human beings who will be functional. Yeah? And unless we address that, and I've said it, and I repeat, Kibaki had goodwill in 2007. He did not utilize that. 2007, yeah, everything was hostile. He could not come up with these reforms. When we came up with the new constitution in 2010, then politics came in again, and it started playing its head there. Now, Dr. Arya said, we have 5 police officers sitting in a commission that cannot decide on the welfare of its officers. Yet, these are people that have won the boot. Probably the chairman and his other team, these are civilians, they will not feel that pinch. But for a person like me and them, we've been there, we know what is ailing the service, and we know where to correct things. So the issue is the willingness.
A holistic reform strategy shouldn't just focus on looking at how the police conduct themselves in line of work, but also how do they work? Like what sort of circumstances do they operate?
The work environment. You've been to the police stations?
Yeah.
Just go to the public toilets in the police station and you see.
I've not been to the public.
Try.
Fortunately, now that you're warning.
Visit the police lines. See how these officers live. Get that person from his house. He's already stressed, traumatized with his living condition, and then you bring him to the station to serve the public. What will happen? And you have a boss here, as he has said, will not listen to you. I have a sick child. I need 2 days off. Kazi kwanza. I'm not feeling well. Dawa kwanza. We have pressure of exams, so nobody's being given off duty. We just need to serve first. I mean, this is what the National Police Service Commission was brought in to address. But unfortunately, it has failed miserably. And this is why in 2023, we're still talking about reforms that we discussed with the Waki Commission in 2010 to date.
All right. Dimas, do you think there's a nexus between the welfare and should I call it the bad manners or whatever that we see? Because corruption, extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, and just abuse of human rights, some of the issues that people have complained about with regards to...
These issues all feed into each other. Yes, because even evidenced by the police vetting that was done during the Kavuludi's period, you found that there is a cadre of police officers who are doing extremely well, obviously because of extortion and corruption. So there is a lack of fairness in recruitment, in transfers, in career progression. And so it creates room for a person to be disgruntled, to be stressed. And this coupled with normal policing work, which for an officer may may involve internalizing certain domestic issues that happen within the community. Internalizing a murder, someone has been murdered, you are the one investigating, then you have to go and act as a witness. You know, these are things that weigh upon you. Then now, couple that with bad living conditions, that you're living with your family, with another family in the same house. And that's why we've had a lot of mental health challenges in the last few years, dealing and then leading to a lot of murder-suicides. But that notwithstanding, even the police vetting that we had during that time was only looking at financial probity. It was only looking at, do you have money that you're not supposed to have, right? It did not look at officers' suitability. It did not look at their human rights records. And so, as much as we did vetting, we did not go far enough to ensure that we have officers that deserve to be serving Kenyans. The current task force has recommended that there is vetting above the level of SSPs, which is welcome. But what criteria will be used for this vetting? And also, I think we need to extend that to any officer that wants to be promoted needs to go through vetting. And so we have to figure out how to do that, because we are in a situation where I am telling you, if you are a business person in a community, every day there are 2 officers who will come to your shop and they will take money from you. I don't know what that money is usually called, facilitation or something. But this is happening every day. And so this is the issue we're talking. How do you solve that issue? And I made a presentation before the current task force, and this was one of the questions that was asked to me directly. I don't know the answer to that, but we have come to a level where even culturally, the police is in a certain state that may need an overhaul.
And you talked about a human rights record, track record.
Yes.
Do we have a way of establishing that even in records? How do we get to gauge a particular?
I would imagine that in future we should have a database from IPOA, from Internal Affairs, and from even the station level that speaks to what complaints have been tabled against an officer. What challenges has this officer, disciplinary challenges has he had with his superiors? Because what we find is we have a task force report that has glossed over the reason that we have a national dialogue right now. We have a national dialogue because of what happened during the Maandamano this year, and it is a replica of what happened in 2017. And so perhaps we're not internalizing the problems that we're talking about. So it is financial, it is political, it is internal in terms of how promotions are done, how recruitment is done. And now, coupled with that, now we want to say that National Youth Service will be now the main source of police officers. Yet, if you look at the recruitment of National Youth Service right now, it is where people with connections get a certain chunk of people. Now, if you're important, you'll be told, now we can give you 10 NIS officers to get in there. Now imagine that is now going to be the pool of officers. It is going to take us back to the point where we had a tribalized police service, where we had officers who are there because they know someone. I respect the National Youth Service. I think it is separate from the National Police Service. Its recruitment should be separate. The National Police Service is a security organ with certain obligations that touch on everyone's right to life, right to property, and all other human rights. It is not a joke that we now want to say that as long as you proved yourself in NYS, now you can enter into National Police Service.
I heard that the head of state saying that during his address in Parliament the other day, just talking about, I can't remember, it was 70 or 80% thereabout of recruitments, even in KDF and the other disciplines, would be coming from the National Youth Service. What do you think about that, Musamali? Even politicians, we've had them encouraging the young people at the grassroots.
You've heard what Dr. said here. Police service is a calling. If you look at me, I was a 3rd generation cop. My grandfather was a policeman. My father was a policeman. When I left high school, I wanted to be a policeman. I refused all else because my heart was to serve the people in the police service. But right now, we are taking police recruitment as a place to reward cronies, political cronies. You talk about recruitment of 10,000 police officers, so let's say 3,000 police officers from the grassroots. Those that will be recruited on the ground after paying bribes will be around 20%. 80% positions are shared within Nairobi. The Office of the President, the Inspector General has been given 5 slots, his deputy has been given 2.
These are examples.
No, it happens. It happens.
Yeah?
This is something that happens. I was in a training school here, and I know. It happens. So unless now we get people who join the service with the intention of serving, it's a calling, there's a push for you to join the service, as opposed to hakuna kazi Kenya, so the only opportunities that we have is the police, the NYS, and the military.
So that compromises
quality
of work.
Yes, quality of work. That compromises professionalism, and it's the root of corruption now we are talking about in the services. And unless we deal with that, I mean, the solution that we need to save the police, we need just to be very brutal in making sure some of these reforms, take root and they're enacted. Because right now we've only been giving lip service to police reforms and nothing has happened. And as I've said, if you look at this Maraga report, it mirrors the Titus Naikuni report. Word by word. Maybe they've changed a few sentences here. But the only bit that becomes difficult is the implementation. When we have IPOA, and you're telling me you need to empower another unit again to do what IPOA is doing, the Internal Affairs unit, it's mirroring, Internal Affairs mirrors what IPOA does. So why should I go and report to Internal Affairs unit, yet I know IPOA is mandated to deal with this problem? We are bringing in somebody else to do what an independent commission, a constitutional commission, is supposed to do. And you're saying, let us form a board for that. Right.
But I believe, I believe the task force has said that there needs to be a demarcation between the Internal Affairs unit and IPOA. And they've said that the Internal Affairs unit will only deal with disciplinary issues. Yeah, yet now issues of criminal in nature are the mandate of IPOA.
Yes, that's true.
Maybe you can weigh in on that.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to say. The task force has made very progressive recommendations on that issue, because unfortunately the Internal Affairs unit now is also unable to carry out its functions independently. And this is because whenever there are reports by officers to that unit, and the Internal Affairs unit takes it up to try and sort issues, the director of the Internal Affairs unit is under the Inspector General of Police. So the Internal Affairs unit has no independence in terms of operations. In fact, this is IPOA that recommended the Internal Affairs unit move away from police premises so that it can have a measure of independence. If we have an independent Internal Affairs unit, so to speak, that which is able to deal with the affairs of the officers, administrative affairs, then even the pressure on the Independent Policing Oversight Authority will ease. Because we find 30% of our complaints come from the police officers themselves. So that even some of the complaints we get, we have to refer them back to the Internal Affairs unit, because that is where they are domiciled. But the officers will insist that we handle those matters because they know the Internal Affairs unit is still within or under the Inspector General of Police. So it's true. The Internal Affairs unit is a very important unit within the police service, and it should be encouraged. The only thing we need to do is to give it a level of independence so that it can operate without supervision from the Inspector General of Police. While at the same time, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority is left with critical issues on crime within the service, deaths, within the service, and those are the other matters. In any case, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority has the mandate to look through what the Internal Affairs unit is doing. Yeah, so that if we suspect a matter before the Internal Affairs unit is taking longer than it should, we have a mandate to call the file and either deal with it ourselves or advise on its expedition. So internal affairs unit is important, and it has been given a space in these recommendations, which I think is quite progressive. Yeah, but what to look at is the welfare of the officers, because if you think about the suicides and the murders that are happening within the service, and if you go deeper to carry out a sort of investigation to find what really happened, you will find that sometimes there are even sexual harassment bits within the service. And you will find, for instance, just as an example, if a lady officer, perhaps married, refuses the advances of a senior officer, that lady officer will be transferred. On the other hand, you find on the housing bit now, you find a married officer living with his wife in those small cubicles, is paired up with an officer who is a bachelor. And this married officer goes out on night duty, so leaving the officer and the wife within the same. So you see, those are some of the things that we don't see that happens within our service. I do not think there is any other civil service personnel who are treated as poorly as we treat our officers. Yet we expect them to be law enforcers, those in charge of law and order. Some of the officers stay in hardship areas for 6 years. The law is clear. Their manual is clear on transfer. The National Police Service Commission knows that they should not last more than 3 years. I see a very progressive recommendation in this report, because this report wants to automate even the transfers. So that if you are in a Northern Frontier district and your 3-year tenure has ended, automatically even the payment stops, because you should be moved to another area. So I think that's why I'm saying this report needs expeditious implementation. We have enough laws. We don't need any more laws. Yeah. And as Musumari says, these recommendations have been there in previous task forces. So what now is required is implementation. I'm confident that there is political goodwill. But I also want to repeat that the men and women who have been given responsibility by the Constitution to head certain institutions should not have politicians as scapegoats for their intransigence. Let people start with their 2 feet. Let there not be narrow, selfish interests. Let us serve the country as men and women of integrity.
All right. Let's talk about that issue of transfers, Musamali, for a little bit. I've never understood why an officer who fails to deliver on their mandate or acts in a manner contrary to how they should be conducting themselves is transferred. Is that like the punitive strategy to address some of these issues? And then the proposal here said the 3-year transfer, proposal in this particular recommendation. Is that something that you think, augurs well with you, having been within the service? Yeah,
what is happening, and I consider it a wrong method of doing things, is using transfers as a punishment to police officers. And I think this is what is actually really pushing the police to the edge. And as he has said, there's a manual about transfers. How would you transfer an officer from one station to another? I remember during our days, when you are recruited, you are joining the GSU, there's a letter that you're given and you're told you will serve in the GSU for a period of 6 years. Once you are done with the GSU, because we operate in hardship areas, harsh conditions, you will now be transferred to the regular police. Once in the regular police, you will never again be transferred to the hardship areas. So you come now, settle, start a family. When you come from Kiganjo, and you're being deployed to those similar hardship areas, northeastern Kenya those days, North Rift, part of North Rift were considered to be hardship areas. You're supposed to serve in those hardship areas for a period of 3 years. You complete your tenure, you are then transferred to forward areas. Other areas where now you can come, settle, and form a family. Now, as it is, you'll have a police officer who has come from Kiganjo. Instead of being sent to those hardship areas to start his career from there, he is brought to Nairobi, and that is the end of the story. We have another officer who has come from the GSU. Immediately on conversion, instead of being brought to forward areas as it was envisioned in the police standing orders, he is now sent back again to those hardship areas. And this is where the problem lies now. Nepotism and
so things are just done without even...
Things are just done without following procedure. Things are done without following due process. And this is why he is so harsh on the police command. He's saying the problem is at the top. And if we need to clean, we need to start from the top. We need to deworm police management. And everything down here will flow smoothly. We have it on the words of the Inspector General when he was at the Kenya Institute of Administration. He said this issue of returns, you people want returns. And he was talking to senior officers. So what does he know that we don't know? And even went ahead and said, some, when I got into office, they came and tried to...
They offered him.
They offered me. What did he do with them? What did he do about that? What administrative action did he take to deter future endeavors like this ones? He did nothing. He was only telling us, as the members of the public, what did he expect us to do? So you are accepting that there is a rot in the service. You know there's a problem. And also this issue of saying that after every 3 years, a police officer needs to be transferred, we should rethink that strategy. We should rethink that strategy. Why am I saying this? You see, when you serve in a particular station and you're a person of integrity, you become family and part of that community. You are acceptable in that community. And I can give a very good example. Chief Inspector Wanyama, when he was the OCS Kisumu, when he was transferred to Nairobi, people demonstrated, bring Wanyama. We want Wanyama. Why? He was serving them with integrity, and he was serving them humanely, and people accepted him to be part of that community. And policing becomes easy for you. You will get intel information from the community, popular intelligence. People will come and talk to you and tell you we have a criminal living amongst us, as opposed to having new officers every 3 years. You start an investigation before you even make you have your final report. You're handing over this file to another person. It's also defeating justice. Because you will go to these courts, you will find an officer who was handling an issue in Nairobi has been transferred to Kiunga. Now, getting that officer from Kiunga to come and testify is a Herculean task. At the end of the day, you'll find that case
So the report does not address those complexities?
It didn't look at that particular angle of the pros and cons of moving these police officers. Me, I will agree. If you're serving in those harsh areas, after 3 years, it's okay. But
it applies in certain contexts and not in others.
Yeah, that is true.
Oh, Dr. Igancho, do you have anything to say that? You are supporting the 3-year rotation?
Yes. I think what informs the constant transfers is that, of course, as he says, on one hand, it can be good. The communities sometimes want to fraternize with the officers within their area, but also it can have very adverse effects because even the community themselves are also to blame for the ills that are happening within the membership of the National Police Service. Because it is the members of the public. You know, sometimes we imagine that the officers demand bribes. But also the members of the public offer those bribes. I mean, it takes two to tango. And if you think about it, it's actually the members of the public who are very aggressive in giving the bribes. There are people who have made police officers their debt collectors. So that if somebody has your debt, you go to the station, you report. So whether that matter is of a civil nature or not, the officer will take it up upon himself and will go looking for or summoning the debtor. And you know that is none of their business. So the members of the community, when they stay for long with those officers, they buy them, you know, they pocket them, so that it's known. Even where, say, for instance, where illicit brews are being cooked, the officers will turn a blind eye. You know, when you go to make a report to a police station, you find there is a lot of police inaction. Because the person, you come to report, and then the person you have reported also comes. Maybe offers a bribe, and then what you wanted, the help you needed is ignored. So some of those things, if we have a change of officers, the officers will come, carry out their duties because they are impersonal. You know, they are not integrated completely with the community. They are professional. So on one hand, yes, some officers, because I remember there are matters that we take, some complaints. There's an officer who shoots, you know, I mean, extrajudicial killings as we may. And then the community is happy. Ati huyu alikuwa mkola, huyu alikuwa mwizi. You know, it's just as well that the officer has eliminated him.
So they become a hero.
Yeah, he becomes a hero.
That village. In that
exactly, yeah, exactly. But you see, due process demands that that criminal is arrested, prosecuted, and convicted.
All right.
Because if we encourage extrajudicial killings again, I mean, that's another problem that we have. So the members of the public also must know that they are also responsible for the ills that are happening within the National Police Service.
All right. Dimas, you had something to say, and I know, Musamali, you want to weigh in on that as well?
Yes. If you look at the text that created the policing as we know it in Kenya after the 2010 Constitution, it was meant to be professional, accountable, and human rights compliant. That's number one. Number two, it was meant to police in a democratic manner. Policing where the people, they seek the legitimacy from the people instead of imposing themselves on the people. And one of the tools for this was community policing, where the officers, the OCS, and at the county level, they seek legitimacy from the people by consulting them in terms of policing. And in our work, the officers we see implementing community policing where they engage with the public with a respectful manner. You realize that even during incidences such as Mandamano, they would be able to escort the people to the streets and then they go back and life continues. But when the officers act as this arm of government that is just there to extort, to punish, to arrest, is a whole other issue. And we had mechanisms for community policing. What happened to it? We turned it into something called Nyumba Kumi. Nyumba Kumi is sort of a Tanzanian model of basically encouraging people to snitch on each other. It is encouraging people to know each other and to say whenever they see something wrong. But community policing is encouraging policing where people discuss. The community discusses whenever there's a security issue in an area, whenever they can tell that if you walk here at a certain time, you feel comfortable enough to go and tell the OCS that we think there's a problem here. And so, and even when there is some sort of crime, and you know crime usually becomes incremental. You know, an officer can actually find you doing something wrong and choose to warn you and forgive you. You know that? When the officers know the community, now they go into alternative justice systems sometimes, tell the people, you see, we have noted you, please stop this. And in fact, the community would be backing that decision, and you'd find that there's less crime because the police know the people. There's less antagonism between the community and the police. We've lost the plot on community policing, yes, yet we have a statutory mandate to do community policing. And I think basically we have allowed ourselves, we go back to the issue of welfare, of command, yet we have documents, guidelines on career progression, guidelines on sexual harassment, guidelines on gender-based violence that we have just discarded or failed to fund. We had the county policing authority, right?
Yeah.
That has never been implemented.
It
has never been implemented, which was supposed to now be a mechanism where even the county government and the national government through the police come together to deal with the issues that happen within that community.
Yeah. So we have suggestions on the table, but then it seems like we really are still looking for more solutions, yet we already have more than what we need. That's what I'm getting from this sit down. Musamal, I know you had something to add, but even as you do that, there is that deliberate also attempt to sort of heighten the professionalism within the service. One of the key issues that was recommended was to raise the grade to C-, the entry grade into the service from the current D+, but for marginalized areas, of course, for obvious reasons, maintain that at D+, and of course also have other cadres that would attract how, the so-called professionals into the service, so this doing it in 2 levels, the constables and the likes. I mean, do you think this is going to give us a better outcome in terms of the role of the police service? Especially what is the impact of raising that bar when it comes to grade?
It has been tried before. And in fact, we raised the bar to C, from C- to C. And then we said even if we have somebody with a C+, then he's eligible for recruitment in the police. But at some point, we still went back and said, no, look here. The brain drain is too much. These people come in with good qualifications, get into the service, and within a very short time, they will want to exit. They come in with the mentality that since I went to school, I want to be an inspector within 2 years, which is not going to happen. And immediately they realize that now this is where I've hit the ceiling in terms of this, they exit the service. So somebody thought that if we have a D+ person who can be recruited and trained and serve the police longer, then we better go take that direction. But this is a noble idea. I believe when you look at the kind of clientele that the police serve, they serve the top cream. From the bottom up, you'll find a policeman wanting to arrest a doctor, a police constable being sent to arrest a lawyer, a police constable being sent to arrest a what? An engineer. Now, if there's that discrepancy in the educational level, even the respect will not be there. Not only from those people I've mentioned, even the public. If you look at the way the public view the police, anything happens, anything that has been done by the police, go to Twitter, the D+ material, D+ material, disparaging the police, degrading them to that level that will also affect their performance. And when you talk about brutality, it's being cultivated by that.
All right.
So what we need, let us have improved standards of education, people with improved standards of education being recruited in the police, but how do we retain these people? The retention now is the question we need to ask ourselves. And it all boils down now to the issues of welfare. It boils down to the issue of merit in terms of promotion, merit in terms of deployment, which is also missing. And we are still blaming the police command on this.
So somebody would prefer, I'd rather be a doctor outside the service than within. Because
yes, even if you bring in a...
What this is trying to do is to attract those professionals through the cadets and the constables, the entry, 2 levels of entry. But then again, how are you going to motivate them to stay and even to pursue their...
They are there and they are living in droves.
All right. I want to sample feedback, and then I'll give you a final round of remarks as we close this conversation. Remember, we have been talking about police reforms. We have the report on the table by the retired Chief Justice David Kenani Maraga, and we invited your thoughts on some of the proposals and even what you yourself have to say with regards to the manner in which the police have handled themselves. Now, Engineer Lazaro, you say police should be granted permission to form their own union to speak on their behalf, just like teachers. Police should be separated from politics, where successive regimes being seeing them as part of their youth wingers. Thank you, Engineer Lazaro. We have Nixon Dungire. Reforming the police is quite an uphill task. Why? Because when it comes to issues like corruption, you find that the police are often as corrupt as the corporate government that employs them. Otherwise, charity begins at home. And then we have Okello Mwalimu. Kenya has a competent and a committed police service, which is poorly managed and misused for political reasons. Corruption may be as a result of poor remuneration. Due to this, most policemen, women, have overcommitted their pay slips. Their salaries must be increased. All right, we have Remy Butia, a vital area to look at in the task force report here is community policing, just what you were talking about, a constitutional and statutory requirement under our laws. Policing cannot succeed without involving and working with the people. Citizens are essential stakeholders. Babu Michael, KE, the Maraga Commission report recommends 40% pay rise for police officers, which if implemented perhaps will solve the corrupt nature of the officers. We have seen cases like recently when an officer allegedly shot a man for not giving a 400 shillings a bribe. Yeah, okay. And we have All right, so that is actually what you have been saying, and we really appreciate you just taking time to share your thoughts with us on the topic that you are having. I'd like to give a chance to our panelists just to give us the final remarks on this conversation. I'll begin with you, Dimas.
Well, yes, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the task force for really looking at the issues that they were mandated to look at. It is important to have a professional, human rights compliant, accountable police service as the Constitution demands. There are so many programs that we have done in the name of policing that have not been implemented, and they've not been implemented because of the ills that are in, or the adverse interests that are in the police. And as I part, an example is the digital OB, which records every complaint, every person that is booked. Mm-hmm. We know the nature of what happens in weekends in police stations where people in the streets are booked only to be released after giving bribes. This would have saved that situation. But as much as the pilots were done, it was never implemented.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I see. I'm happy to see that there is political goodwill in police reforms, and I want to thank the President for coming up with this task force. Thank the task force itself for coming up with these very progressive recommendations. But I also want to give a word to our commanders to note that there is a paradigm shift now in the country in the manner in which the membership of the National Police Service should be handled, so that everyone now have their heads on the deck. And I know for a fact we have very young, very professional and very learned police officers even now, and it's a good chance now for the National Police Service Commission, if it lives through this crisis, to get back its mandate and try to make sure that the National Police Service is a professional service, whereby we will encourage the young ones to join it as a calling, not as a place to come and idle aloud. So I want to say that the country is moving.
Or if you've not performed well and you have no options.
Yes, exactly.
So you think it's actually...
Exactly. The National Police Service is not a dumping site for people. It's a noble profession, and it should be kept that way.
All right, Musamali?
Yeah, we all agree that the National Police Service is suffering from so many hangers. And part of the recommendations we are seeing from the Maraga task force is trying to address not the whole problem, but just part of it. And what I would like to see is the implementation of these recommendations. We're having so many other commissions that have come up with similar recommendations as he's saying. So many things are not being done. And that comes from having a political goodwill. Yeah? And the president right now, as we speak, he has that political resource from the people. He has the mandate from the people. And the police are supposed to be there to serve the public. So let us see implementation of this, because it has always been back and forth. Every other time we have a commission, somebody will come in, try and implement part of the report, and then there is also that backlash, especially from the political wing. So let us agree and say that we need a service that is supposed to be there for all Kenyans and to serve all Kenyans. And let us delink politics from security services. That one we will forge ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, George Musamali, for your remarks. George Musamali is a security analyst. I was also having a sit down with the Dr. J. Mwaiganja, Commissioner at IPOA, and Dimas Kiprono, Deputy Executive Director, ICJ Kenya. Once again, I appreciate your time, gentlemen. And that is how we wrap it up. It's a document that is now upon us to interact with and to understand the nitty-gritties of it, of course. And the journey has just begun from what we are concluding here. The implementation is where the solution lies. I hope we will not be here again some other time after election talking about the same subject the same way, hoping that we should be able to take advantage of the opportunity before us as a country to reform our police service. That's how we wrap it up. We will be shifting gears in just a bit to discuss matters health, and of course this month we are choosing to talk about the mental health in the context of men. Anasemanga mwanaume ni kujikaza, mwanaume There's a lot that happens behind the scenes, and we just want to talk to our men and the society at large to understand what it means to be a man and to do it right. That coming up shortly. My name is Safina Chengoma. We take a break for now.